Are you struggling to lose weight and keep it off? Tired of wasting time and money on starvation diets that lead to more frustration and stress? If there was a weight loss solution that could actually work for you, would you try it? Then head to Golo.com.
I'm Steve. I lost 138 pounds in 9 months on Golo.
I'm Amber. I've lost 128 pounds with Golo.
If you're ready to take back control of your life, head to Golo.com now and see how Golo can work for you. That's Golo.com.
My sleep is way better. My inflammation has gone way down. Golo saved my life. I was way overweight. That's what sent me down the path. I wanted to make sure and live for my kid.
I have literally tried everything. I was on the verge of getting gastric bypass surgery, and I saw the Golo commercial, and it was the last thing I tried because it worked.
Join over 2 million people who found a better way to lose weight with Golo. Your healthier and happier life begins at Golo.com. That's Golo.com. Again, Golo.com.
Percolate on a particular mix of odd and inspiring news headlines in Wendy's Coffee House. Newsmakers with a penchant for the unknown, unexplained, and unusual share their experiences with UFOs, ghost encounters, near-death experiences, and more for your own unique blend of Wendy's Coffee House Curious. And now, here's Wendy.
Hi there. You're going to want to listen to this. This is something that it's very well, I guess, you're familiar with it. It's very well applied. But maybe the technique and the idea behind it you might not be as familiar with. We're going to get into radionics, okay? So hang on. First, a few headlines in the news because it's never a dull moment. There's one of the fun ones, I like the fun stuff, is that there's a politician who's running for office who does say that she has been abducted by aliens, and she's getting an endorsement. We could not have done anything near that, get the headline, the topic, the whole 9 yards, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And now it's like, that's no big deal. So finally, some of this stuff, no matter how far out it is, because of people who've had experiences, it's getting a little bit I guess people are less frightened by the whole thing. On that line, there's a really cool, Canadians see UFOs too, and they've got a really, they're good at documenting theirs. But there was one recently that, I think at Okanagan, over the water, and you can see they're kind of, they're illuminated, and they have something inside them. So the speculation is that those might be the ETs, but not in a ship, just in a bubble. This is getting so much more interesting. Radionics, talking with Duncan, Laurie. The book is fantastic. It gives you the history, the secret art, and what this is. If you've ever dowsed, if you've ever done anything, it's that subtle energy that makes things happen, the power of intention. And this is how it started, who's behind it, and one of the guys involved in this was from Kansas City, worked for Kansas City Power and Light. And that is what I thought, good grief, here's a local tie. And this stuff, once this stuff hits mainstream, we are going to change significantly, huge, all across the spectrum, because it talks about how you can heal yourself, how you can change your thoughts to create reality that's a little bit more coherent and cohesive. And that's a little subtle. So Duncan, hi Duncan.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate being on.
You can better explain what radionics is. So that, I think, mine's too vague. Specifically, what is it and how does it work?
Well, let's start with the skeptical analysis of radionics. And for that, I will quote British fringe scientist expert Mark O. Tinkington, who once described radionics as a syncretic hybrid of witchcraft and emergent technologies of the earliest 20th century. And this is from a CD called Radionics Radio by Daniel Wilson. So that's the cynical perspective.
He's not a fan.
Well, he may be, but he's approaching it the way most people would if they understood it or saw it casually or got to it through New Age kind of vernacular. So that's the way most people approach it. But my approach is a great deal different.
Well, I love this because this is a history. It goes back into the different variations as it has evolved that certain people have applied to it to bring it, to actually evolve it and make it more, I think, understandable, relatable to the daily life.
Well, let me. My perspective comes from the fact that I'm a sculptor by profession. I'm not a radionics person, and I'm not a scientist. But sculpture is an empirical discipline. You can only learn it by doing it. That's exactly what is the case with each one of these radionic inventors that I write about in the book. They are very, very different in terms of their approach, their methodology, their technology, their whole idea of what got them stimulated to do this type of research varies tremendously from individual to individual, the same way it does for artists in art forms.
Well, when you're using this, and because Kandinsky is the one that came to mind with me because of the geometry and the belief that the colors influence us in subtle ways, and I that's for me, that's absolutely the reason I paint different rooms in the house, different colors, because each one I feel different when I step into it. I think.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Kandinsky was a theosophist, by the way.
Oh, okay. Which brings
that's
the Rudolf Steiner.
Yeah, I mean, these are all variations of alternative thinking, mystical thinking in some cases.
In your book,
the
mention I wanted to get in touch with the Kansas City connection, because he did he did a lot to help bring this to public awareness.
All right, let me tell you a little bit about T. Gale and Hieronymus. He's actually probably the most renowned figure in American radionics, even today. And this is because he's the only person that ever got a United States patent on a radionics device. And part of the reason he was able to do that was because he was a celebrated individual, both personally and professionally. He was in the division as an electrical engineer in World War I. He graduated as an officer, and then for 30 years he was a professional engineer working for Kansas City Power and Light. And in that term, he was credited with designing the phase locking system that connects power stations across the country. He was also licensed radio operator, becoming a senior member of the Institute of Radio Engineers. He was with KDKA in Pittsburgh, PA, where he took part in the first ever public radio broadcast. So what I'm seeing from his professional career, he was very, very highly respected individual. Mm-hmm. And this is went a long way towards making people of his era interested in radionics and giving it public exposure.
Well, and that was what I found fascinating, was also the radio involvement. Robert Monroe, the one who's known for the out-of-body experiences and the Monroe Institute now, that does the work with the hemisync and the brain entrainment, that the radio background for both of these guys. This is a huge, I think, synchronistic kind of thing, because it connects us to the audio, to the electrical, to that other element that we can influence. I want to bring back, there's one of the superstars of this movement, William Tiller, who's practicing now, and the quote that he says, "For the last 400 years, an unstated assumption of science is that human intention cannot affect what we call physical reality. Our experimental research of the past decade shows that for today's world, and under the right conditions, this assumption is no longer correct. We humans are much more than we think we are, and psychoenergetic science continues to expand the proof of it." And he works in all sorts of areas, but the power of thought, like if you are praying for someone and focusing on improving their situation and then seeing results, which they have done at the Pear Lab at Princeton when that was active, that, I think, kind of gives you a background that this is changing, that more people are coming online, and the research right now is a part of that influence. Does that make sense?
Yes, I mean, this goes back to what's called the QMP, or the quantum measurement problem, which is sort of the classical linchpin of quantum physics. And without trying to pretend I'm a scientist, I will just mention that in this experiment, quantum objects appear to behave differently when observed than when unobserved. So the QMP is a problem because it violates the common sense doctrine of realism, which assumes that the world at large is independent of observation. So the minute we step through the door into radionics or any of these alternative sciences, we're looking into a world where reality and observation commingle, and reality can change as a result of consciousness being applied to it. And that's what this experiment, the double-slit interference pattern experiment, was tried with thought. Thought was used to experiment to direct light through one slit or another to influence the probability.
Just a minute, Duncan. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and get into more of this with how trees talk and plants sing. Next, Duncan Laurie on KCMO Talk Radio. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. I'm distracted. That's a plant singing. Oh, kind of. Okay, hold on. We'll rewind, back up. Duncan Laurie is my guest. The book is called The Secret Art, and it's about radionics. And there's a reason it's called The Secret Art, okay? We'll get into that a little bit later. But this is phenomenal. And maybe people are familiar with Cleve Baxter, who first hooked up the plants, and you could hear them singing, and people realized, oh my gosh, plants are communicating. You did this, and this is like a Bob Dylan song, loosely under, we have to play a little bit more of it to get the whole effect. But that's what happened with this.
Well, I was working with an electrical engineer named Gordon Salisbury on trying to develop ideas for the book that you mentioned. And we really had to try to find out what was this energy that everybody's working with in these devices? Where does it exist? How do we perceive it? Where does it come into reality? And part of the place where that happens is in these Baxter experiments that you mentioned, which is where electrodes are hooked up to plants, and the voltage that goes between the two electrodes on the surface of the plant picks up a signal from the plant, and that signal can be changed into a pitch, and that pitch can be assigned an instrument. So simply by observing the electrical voltage fluctuations on the leaf of a plant, you can have a plant playing an instrument. And what I did was played some songs for the plants and let them see how they reacted to it. And that's just what you were hearing. You were hearing a plant, a philodendron, hooked up to a device that measures this small voltage, millivoltage, and then has it assigned to an electric piano. And that electric piano is playing along with Bob Dylan song.
See, that's just phenomenal, because that means the plant is making a choice, is choosing to create something that we hear in some way.
Well, that's an assumption. We don't really know what's causing this to happen. That's what's so exciting about it. It doesn't seem like it's random, first of all. It's repeatable. We've done it many times with many recordings. There are certain things that take place that are very hard for someone like myself, who's not a scientist, to really have any certainty about. But the phenomena is demonstrable. We did it hundreds of times, and with fascinating results. And other people are doing it now, too, all over the world.
See, that's what I think is so fascinating, that there's so many people who are connecting the dots. And in your book, you're talking about the names that it goes by: the occult technology, radiesthesia, dowsing, psychotronics, and radionics. And the deal is the basic assumption, and I'll use your words for this: all matter emits radiation. The human body can be used to detect them, and the mind can influence these radiations in extraordinary ways. And some of the research has to do with certain types of issues, certain types of diseases emit. And then there's one study in the book that you're talking about, a type of electrical current, a type of X-ray that you can pick this up with, and that's how you identify the disease. But we aren't anywhere near going into the, further along and saying, well, it's emitting that. I know it's cancer, so let's eradicate it. We kind of are getting on the very cusp of being able to identify it. And what comes next is still up for grabs.
Well, the problem is that every single person that approached it in his own fashion, using his own tools at his disposal. And therefore, you get lots of different results. It's more like art. If you think of this as art, it's using consciousness. Scientist doesn't like the study of consciousness because it's self-referential. How do you separate yourself from what you're seeing? You see, how can you quantify it? That's the problem. So we have something here going on that involves an aspect of our awareness which is very hard to quantify. So it becomes more of a qualitative experience, like art, like aesthetics. And because of that, it has to be understood and approached a little more sympathetically.
Well, I think you make a good analogy when you tie it into cooking and, equating it with that. I think that's an easier way to interpret it. When somebody's a good cook and they enjoy their cooking and you go and you eat it, it's like, wow, this is fantastic. Versus somebody else who's not into it or manufactured.
Well, put 10 cooks together with the same pots and pans, the same ingredients, and the same time span, and they will come up with vastly different qualities of food. Something is transferred from the cook into the food. I mean, everybody knows this.
Well, it's a great British baking show.
Tell a scientist. What?
The Great British Baking Show. That's an example.
Exactly. Where's the science for that, huh?
It's in the flavor.
Yeah, exactly. It's empirical, right? You have to do it to understand it.
Well, okay, but the thing is, the equipment, the measurements of this is very specific. This isn't just this is actual. There are utensils and different types of products that you can get to measure the energy output, the things that we're talking about.
Well, the measurement is taking place through the agency of consciousness, through essentially a dowsing reflex within the human body. I mean, this is where it gets dicey for science. You can't really look at this in the same way that you look at a scientific experiment. It's much more intuitive, and people have various skill levels when they approach it. So when you say they're instruments, yes, they're instruments that are used for calibration, but the real instrument is the human consciousness, the human mind and body. And the instruments, as Tiller said, are really training wheels for the mind. It just allows you to become more capable through your experience.
There's something I can equate with that. I have this interaction. It's an electrical interaction with a nightlight, and I can demonstrate it. Except this one time when I took it to somebody else's house, and there were two absolute staunch. One was very scientific, one was very analytical, the other was a skeptic. And when I put a light in that room, absolutely zero. And I'd been doing this for, at that point, maybe 5 or 10 years with this light, showing people that this is how it works and you can influence it. And that was mind-boggling because I hadn't anticipated the factor. I mean, even though I know if you're doing an experiment, the person is not an objective observer. I knew that a long time ago. I just hadn't seen it in reaction to what I was doing that threw my whole thing out of the water. It's like, so this is another thing when a skeptic enters the equation. I remember somebody else, I can't remember if it was Ingo Swann, I think it might have been Ingo Swann, saying the minute the skeptic came into the room, he knew that that research problem was going to just become more complex because they would throw off the results. And so
these are fields that are being created between yourself and the plant or whatever the subject is. You're creating something here. You're bringing it to life, and they're very delicate. And when somebody comes in that's skeptical, it's like hitting the field with a hammer. It collapses.
Absolutely, yeah. The hammer is a good analogy. It's like,
well, the mind's very powerful. You're using the mind to create these things, and you're also using it to obstruct them.
Okay, and let's get into that.
Experiences.
Let's get into that because there was one guy who had these wonderful diagrams and all these pictures of how this worked and how you could use it. Each, individuals could tap into this and bring about usually a guaranteed result. And that information is either, buried deep somewhere or no longer exists. Let's get into that in the next break, okay? You know what I'm talking about, don't you? The paper.
Yes, I do. Don
Okay.
Gerard.
Okay, so hang on. Again, we're talking with Duncan Laurie, the book, The Secret Art, A Brief History of Radionics. And this is fabulous because when mainstream picks up on this, I am serious. It will change the way we view our world and our own actions and the influence we have with our thoughts. Thoughts create, and your mind right now is busy. Don't know what it's doing, but it's busy. The key is to bring it back under your influence where you are consciously aware of how you impact and how you bring on into your reality certain kinds of engagements, of obstacles, of course corrections. This is fascinating. Duncan, you've written a fabulous book. It gives the history, and so I'm really glad that you're able to talk about it and with that art influence create bigger pictures. It's Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. We'll be back after a short break, and if you miss any of it, check out the blog, Wendy's Coffee House Blogspot. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. These are plants singing. Sounds kind of spacey. Duncan Laurie, my guest. And you can check out the book. It's The Secret Art. And there's a reason it's a secret. That's what we're going to get into with this segment. The Secret Art, A Brief History of Radionic Technology for the Creative Individual. And once you get into this, I mean, it's like the world is wide open. I especially like William Tiller's research. And there's a lot more to that. We're not going to get into that this time. But that was Zydeco. So what is it with plants?
Well, they were swinging along with the Zydeco. I want to tell you, if there's one thing I learned about plants, it's they love to party. So,
I'm picturing the plants. My gardenia's just having a ball.
They respond to joy and love and happiness, and when you put on that kind of music and when you put on anything with feeling, the plants' sensors that we hooked up to them respond, very, very strongly. And it's not always predictable. Plants have moments where they get exhausted and tired and don't react. And like you say, people that are there that are skeptical can cramp the experience. But by and large, it's a very interesting thing to see a plant play along with some music. That's what you were playing.
And see, that's part of it, I think, is it really expands your horizons and makes you think a little bit more about what all is going on that we're completely oblivious of, that's a language. It's coherent. They're talking. They're engaging. They're communicating.
Yeah. They want to. They want to communicate. They're in us. They're in our same consciousness that we're experiencing as an individual. They're experiencing as a plant, but we're sharing this medium.
Okay. On your website, too, that I think people can take a look at your art and get a lot more information. Dragonline Studio. If you do that, DuncanLaurie.com, Sculpture Radionics, a studio, and you can see some of the equipment and read more about the background and some of the other things that have been discovered and the uses for this technology. The other thing, this is something that when we get into the secret art, here is an example of the secret aspect. This is a guy who had all of the paperwork and the diagrams that were specific to create certain results. Tell us about that.
Well, we're skipping over quite a lot here because we started out in the early 20th century with basically a crossover between electronics and witchcraft, or radionics as they call it. But this process evolved through time. And by 1992, researchers such as Don Gerard, the man in question who wrote a book called The Paper Doctor, had found that they could affect radionic transactions with even a diagram. They didn't even really need an electronic device. They simply found a way to articulate a rate for a certain type of material or a certain type of treatment. And he combined this drawing, essentially, which he had these in the back of his book. They were already printed out. You would take a drawing and you would put it over a little magnet, and then you would put a small vial of water over it. And based on that simple task, you could begin to effect cures. And he was so good at this that veterinarians were using this on animals. It was the simplest thing you can imagine. It was so absurd that it's just impossible to believe that in 1992 that authorities showed up at his home and took all his books and brought him to a military base and burned them, threatened him. People who were handling his books had their stores ransacked. All copies that were available were confiscated and taken out of public domain. And in spite of that, even he had to retract his own findings and the veracity of his own work, and was forced to basically put it down and apologize for it. Now, why could that happen if something wasn't working? You see, that's the real quality here. Could something as simple as a drawing and a charged cup of water be a threat to the established health authority? It's just absurd. And yet, people were using it, people were getting results. And that's why I wrote about it, because he was so effectively silenced that it's a disgrace to our freedom of speech.
Well, the cool thing about it on the internet, if you look for the book, I just went to Amazon, and your option paperback is $151, 2 new from $473, and 12 used from $151. Or you can get the PDF. Okay, so it's like you can keep it secret, but the internet has a way of getting around that secret stuff, at least at this point. And so if you do some more deep diving here, you'll find some of the diagrams and some of the instructions. And that's what's so fabulous about this. It's low maintenance. The instructions are basically don't get in the way. Don't get in the way. The patterns are magnetic and they work, and just don't try and overanalyze it. Just relax and touch it and go from there.
Yes, and Gerard came from a tradition. He did come out of nowhere. Malcolm Ray, a British radionics researcher, developed card-based, diagrammatic-based radionics. Hieronymus himself and some of the people that studied his technology were also developed. They took his electrical circuit and made it work without just based on the schematic. So this is a kind of a fascinating crossover between what constitutes technology and what constitutes an art. We're talking about drawings here. We're not talking about electronics. Why does this stuff work? Why isn't it used in art? Why isn't it taught in art? After all, shamanic ceremony, which has been going on for thousands of years, incorporates the same basic ideas. So why aren't we taught this? I went to art school. Nobody mentioned this.
No.
Why?
No. And well, as the thing is, when he talked about writing his book, he was saying that he wanted like a handy-dandy little self-help of medical kit that didn't involve carrying along a lot of vials and heavy product. And so he basically went into homeopathy, and that still involved a lot more complex type. The Bach flower remedies is the one that he mentioned. But there, it's more complex. Where this, with the patterns, that you just apply that pattern, and that was more fast acting, easy to use, and everybody could get it. So that, I think, would be quite challenging and in some way, shape, or form intimidating for people who would prefer the pill from a pharmaceutical corporation.
Well, Gerard left us with 5 points in the paper Doctor, and these are important. Number 1 was the all-pervasive but invisible power of magnetism. 2, the ability of water to store patterns of energy. 3, the ability of geometric patterns to store healing potential. 4, the essentially energetic nature of all matter, including the human body. And 5, the body's ability to transfer information by non-chemical means. So that's the summation of his approach. And it's the summation of many of these inventors' approach, but they become ridiculed because they do not follow a systematic, scientific, procedural technique in order to arrive at their ability to heal or do amazing things in agriculture and in forestry and in in forestry certification and all of these potential ecological applications for this technology.
Okay.
But they're being done.
Yeah.
They're being done today all over the world.
Okay, we're going to come back because we're going to do with the paper and the design, the woman who has a farm, and she created her own little cards with pictures and images. So taking that to the next level, is that okay? We'll do that in the next break?
Sure.
Okay, because I think that's another way of viewing this. My guest is Duncan Laurie, and this stuff is fascinating. We don't have enough time to get into all of the things that this can be used for and applied. But again, once you have the mindset and you understand you are influencing reality with your thoughts and your energy, and reality is engaging with you, it's fantastic. The potential we have as humans to create a better reality. Talk Radio KCMO, Wendy's Coffee House. KCMO Talk Radio. That's a vibe. That's not a plant. It's one of us humans doing something funky with it. It almost sounds like the movie wasn't. Oh, darn it!
Now.
Oh, it's
your heart,
it's a meditation with a hemisync. Oh, okay. Well, or similar to hemisync.
Column.
Okay. My guest, Duncan Laurie, and we're talking about all the ways that this can be used, the radionics. And the cool thing, we went from the diagrams on paper. There's a woman who has a farm, and for her, she saw it in that art form. She had cards, and she creates these images that are kind of a three-dimensional, but they're an image on a card of the way this energy looks and feels and works for her. That's the little farm, and you said she's still alive. She's still out there doing her stuff, right?
Yes, as far as I know. And we're talking about Laurie Larson of Little Farm Research in Utah.
Okay.
And, yes, and she's a wonderful teacher of radionics and has been, as well as a practitioner who focuses her work primarily on her family, her garden, her animals, and her personal life, although she does teach. So that's the thing. You have to realize that these techniques can be taught today. They are available for people that want to learn more about it. Ed Kelly at Kelly Research Technology is another excellent place to begin to understand how to approach this field if you want to do it. So, but Laurie's wonderful. She's just she has a certain magic in the way she does things that has impressed many, many people throughout the years. She was also, by the way, working for Estee Lauder as a consultant, using her radionic skills to enhance cosmetics for many years.
I had never thought of that. I also did that cosmetic. I was a rep for Estee Lauder as well in the Jones store, which no longer exists here. Oh, we traveled to Dillard's and Macy's, and those are like bygone era. But I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, makeup it would be a nice way of improving whatever it is you're putting on your skin. And if she's engaging in it, that had to be fantastic. I didn't think about talking with her about how that worked, but that would be another interview.
Yes, and she also has Wise Women Ventures, which is using her radionic skills to support and consult women in business. How about that?
That would be worth a phone call.
I agree. Better get a hold of her.
Okay, so with her, you also had somebody on your site who engaged with you, the cowgirl, an extraordinary radionics healer, because that I thought was fascinating.
Yes, she's not public, so I can't really talk about her. She's certainly one of the best radionic practitioners I've ever come across, and it was due to this book that I was able to meet her and have this type of friendship with her.
Okay,
so she's, yeah.
Let's get back into that, because you say there's a lot of stuff going on right now, and it's under the radar. It's kind of clandestine.
Well, it's under the radar for the general public, but it's not under the radar for the agricultural community or the veterinarian community and many, many other people that use these techniques, not just in their gardens, but to help heal their families and cut their medical costs. I mean, after all, people have to pay a fortune for medical care. It's only likely that things are going to come along that represent alternatives. This is certainly one that's been around for well over 100 years, and if you look at the shamanic aspect of it, thousands of years. So, yes, it's there. It's here to stay, and it's growing large. There's research being done in the Midwest. There are people that are using this on their farms. I've been reluctant to write about it or talk about it because I don't want to put these individuals in any kind of legal jeopardy or put the spotlight on them. But
Right.
I can assure anyone, if you go to the Psychotronic Association conference or any of the radionic conferences that happen out in the Midwest, you will find these individuals and be more than satisfied with what you see and hear.
Okay, yeah, I did print that. Welcome to the United States Psychotronics Association. I'm thinking I'm going to join.
Yeah, you should go. You should go. And there's other, it's even closer to you.
Well,
that take place all the time.
See, I just equated it to dowsing and then work with color, radiesthesia. I didn't really do a whole lot of research behind it, but now that I'm seeing how far it has advanced since I was reading about it in the 90s, I'm really encouraged that this is absolutely waiting to burst onto the scene and give us a different way of working with, for one thing, medicine, but just in our own personal health and being able to identify illness and maybe do restoration work.
Well, what happened with radionics in the last 50 years is that many of the practitioners stopped trying to win the approval of science and stopped making instruments that look like ordinary electronic instruments and just struck out on their own. So what you have is in this field is more like technical Taoism than a type of occult technology. It's morphed into something that utilizes the power of the mind and the operator to do the work, and at the same time, the reverse becomes true. The mind of the operator is brought to bear on the critical details of daily life. You know, you have to address everything with love and patience and care. When you start doing that, then you develop this reciprocal relationship with nature, with your friendships and your business people and everything. And that's the spirit of radionics that is transformed out of this strictly early study of electricity and magnetism and radio and all that sort of stuff. It's become much broader in life, and therefore the techniques are much more accessible to people today than they ever were. They've been computerized. They've become simplified
and mainstreamed in a way. Because
not mainstreamed yet.
Well, okay, on the internet.
They've gone into the technology. They've come into the 21st century.
Yes. Okay, we're going to have to go. But the book in the summary, you go through and do a short overview of all of the practitioners that you have included and give people a real good, solid idea of the history and each person who embellished and made it their own, which means every single person who does this has their own method, their own recipe, their own diet. And when you tap into that, you become an incredible creative, in some way, shape, or form, engager. And listening to the plants, that's just mind-boggling. I loved hearing and listening to Cleve Baxter's work, and you've duplicated it here with the plant Zydeco. Are we ready for some Zydeco on the way out?
Bottom line, it's empowering.
Yes.
It's very empowering.
We're going to keep in touch, Duncan. We're going to keep in touch. In the meantime...
Thank you for having me.
If you're listening and you want to get the book, it's The Secret Art. It's available wherever books are available. And on his website, you can check that out. The website to find out more about Duncan and his artwork and his other ventures, it's duncanlaurie.com. And you will be thrilled, amazed, inspired, I hope, and empowered if you're looking to do a little bit more research on how influential we are with our thoughts and our abilities when we think nothing's happening. The plants are telling us something is. Duncan, thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Okay, bring the music up. Martel, these plants are rocking. It's nice to know they like to party.
Oh, yes, it is.
Hey, thank you. Wendy's Coffee
My
House.
pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Have a great day, a great life, a great world, a great exploration, a great creative dive into the world of being and imagination. See ya.